Good morning and welcome to our Tech Talk of the month. This time we're going to be talking about the Internet of Things. I've got Justin McClung here with me, which your title is what again?
Director of Development, Innovation, and Administration.
That is a very impressive title, and what does that really mean that you do here at Nex-Tech?
Our team is responsible for all the development work, coming up with new product ideas, running them through R&D, as well as the administration side of some of our products.
So somewhere in there that involves the Internet of Things is what you're really saying?
Part of it,
yes.
All
right. Well, fantastic. You know, I was just thinking about this morning. I was reading some of the feeds, and it was referencing how Netflix is now kind of some of the Internet of Things. And I was like, what is going on with that? And so the pause ratio on Netflix on Halloween is 30% higher than it is on any other time, which made a lot of sense. People going to the door,
sure, candy.
Getting candy, and they have to hit pause.
Sure.
Which leads it to a need of an Internet of Things, right?
Sure.
So they've built a doorbell that when the kids ring the doorbell, it will pause the Netflix.
They don't have to think about it.
Right?
One less thing.
And it talks to their Logitech remote, which goes through the internet, that then goes to the TV to pause it. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that, more on a business standpoint, but there's a lot of things coming. And some of this is well-defined. Some of this is going to be a little hypothetical, right? And you're going to kind of paint a little bit of a picture of what the future looks like and some of the big changes coming and really disruption of industry, and we can talk about that. But first, we better start with the definition of the Internet of Things, which I put a graphic up here that kind of covers some of it. But do you want to give us the formal definition?
Sure. The formal definition is a proposed development of the Internet in which everyday objects have network connectivity, allowing them to send and receive data. Very simple.
Fantastic. What in the world does that mean?
Basically, it means everything has a sensor in it and is sending and receiving data and doing something with that data.
Gotcha. And this is going to come into play a lot more, right? We know that the devices are exploding, which is kind of what our next slide is that we have here. And we're seeing that by the year 2020, which seems like a really long time out, but we're almost 2017?
Yep.
So in 3 years, we're going to see 50 billion devices on the internet. So we've got some of these things, automotive, healthcare, consumer electronics, and utilities, but what do you see in some of these areas that are going to be disruptive?
The big ones that are just obvious to me are things like the trucking industry and taxi cabs, things like that. And the good examples are, in the trucking industry, you have humans that have to drive the truck, and they have requirements to sleep so many hours a day, all that kind of thing. Well, once we get to self-driving trucks, theoretically, they could go 24/7. They would only have to fuel up and get back on the road, do maintenance checks, things like that, as well as safety would be dramatically higher. I know a lot of people are worried about safety in self-driving vehicles, but as these self-driving vehicles are on the road together, they're passing data back and forth, learning from each other, and they will be much safer than a human being making that decision on a second-by-second basis.
So before you move on to that one, let's talk a little bit about that, because I know there's a lot of folks out there going, and you even kind of said it as soon as there are, but they exist today, right?
They're out there.
These aren't theoretical things. And some of the data that I'm seeing was, Google's had self-driving cars for, their maps and different things for 2012?
Yeah, millions of miles driven.
Right. And I heard the statistic was the average human driver gets in an accident about every 60,000 miles.
Okay.
And really the car, it's a little depends on who you blame for the accident,
sure.
Right? People run into the self-driving cars sometimes. So
yeah, that's not the self-driving car's fault, that's
right.
The human's fault, right?
But definitely, to your point, millions of miles being driven versus maybe 60,000 accidents. So knowing that this has been happening, and I think their projection is by 2020, they're saying most of the cars being manufactured are going to be capable of autonomous driving.
Right.
Capable.
Right.
So, the obstacles, what are the obstacles that you see involved to that happening? Because we're only talking again in 3 years from now. What do you think, what are we going to see between now and then?
Well, I think you got a few things, but the biggest one is going to be the regulatory side, right? What will the government agencies allow us to do from a trucking personal vehicle whatnot perspective, and what will the rules have to be to allow it. But it's going to be kind of what you're seeing with Tesla today, where it's kind of off and on. You can turn it on, but you can also turn it off. You can kind of do a mix of the types of self-driving, but it's happening. It's going to happen. And I think everybody just needs to understand that that's where the technology is going, and adopt it rather than fight it, because it will make us safer. But there will be glitches. And I know we're going to be talking about security later on, but that's a huge part of anything Internet of Things, and especially self-driving vehicles for sure.
Now, I think it was you that told me that, one of the things you felt was going to drive this was ultimately the finance behind this. Meaning, to your point of trucks running, 7 days a week, 24/7, there's a huge economy of scale here, that you're going to eliminate a lot of cost with the human driver related to that. You're going to, put that piece of equipment on the road much longer, which gives you better value, those kind of things. So do you think that finance is what's going to end up driving maybe the government side of things?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, business drives government decisions. So it comes down to money, and that's those big trucking companies or whatever the industry is using the technology. If they can save on that human expense, they're going to spend money in Washington to make the laws to change it in their favor. I mean, that's just the way it is. And there's no question about it. It's going to happen, and I think the trucking side is going to happen very, very quickly.
And we already saw that. Even this week, one of the things that we saw was Uber, a company that Uber owns, I should specifically say, did actually deliver beer, ironically, via a self-driving semi, a couple hundred miles, I believe what it was. And so it was kind of that first test of that market. But it happened, and it's already happening, and I think it's going to happen. And as most of us live out here in western Kansas that probably are watching this, I can see a lot of benefits. If you want to head to Denver for the weekend, you hop in the car and set autopilot.
Oh, I can't wait.
Do what you want to do, and meanwhile you show up, and what's the big deal? 4.5 hours if you watched a movie.
Exactly. It'll change the way we travel. Absolutely. For sure. But. And then, the next obvious move is into disrupting the taxi cab and personal vehicle space. Uber, Lyft, they've already done that as far as disrupting the process of getting a car. But once self-driving cars are ubiquitous, then there's no need to have an Uber driver. There's no need to have a taxi driver. It's a matter of you pull up an app on your phone, say I want to go from X to A to B, and a few minutes later, car drives up, get in, and you go. No human involved, no money changing hands, no anything.
Wow.
And then to me, the next logical jump for somebody like me is once you're not driving your car anymore, why would you own a car?
Right.
Why wouldn't you just pay a monthly service fee? There's a fleet of vehicles out there, just like a taxi company is today. I need to get to work. I schedule my car to come pick me up at 7:15. I need to go home. Schedule it at 5:30, 6, whatever it is. And you go home.
And I got to thinking about that when you told me that originally. And so I was like, I have a big garage. Well, that could make houses become more efficient because you don't have to have that much more materials to build multi-car garage because you don't need multi-cars sitting in there. And, we could become so much more efficient from that standpoint. Plus, not everybody has to have a car, so you don't have to have hundreds of thousands of cars in the town. You can have, a subset of that as long as there's enough transportation to get you from point A to point B.
Exactly. Plus, then the next industry that affects is the insurance industry, right?
Yeah.
If you don't own a vehicle, you don't need automotive insurance. So it's just, my point is it's a domino effect. Once it starts to go, tons of industries, tons of areas are going to be affected. And depending on where you are and what you do as a career, it could be a negative thing. So as a country, we have to retool our skill sets based around what's coming. Some are quicker than others.
Which, that's the good thing. You brought forward, maybe in this truck driving situation that there could be a truck driver displaced from a job, but somebody still has to fuel these vehicles. Somebody still has to do the maintenance on these vehicles. Somebody has to be tooled up on, probably the computers involved to make all of this stuff happen. The logistics now has gone from an 8-hour shift or 10-hour shift to 24 hours. there has to be logistics to support all that. And yeah, there's a lot of automation that will happen related that already is, but there's still humans that are going to have to be involved in that whole process. The good news is, instead of sitting behind a wheel watching boring mile after boring mile and not being home throughout the week or whatever, there could be where you just go into that local distribution area or the local filling area or whatever the new job is that takes you there. So It's not like we're seeing people just massively unemployed. I think it just changes, to your point.
Exactly.
So the next area we have here is healthcare. I know you're an Apple Watch guy, as am I. That's one of the first areas that we're seeing this change with. I don't know about you get your heartbeat and you get, the activity and all that stuff. That's one of the first areas. What's the next?
Very basic. I think one of the really cool things that I've been hearing about is like for diabetic people being able to measure your blood sugar without a prick. There's going to be sensors underneath the watch that will theoretically, read your blood and give you that information so that you can get it all the time without having to worry about it. I think you're going to see a lot more of that kind of thing where the sensors and the detecting devices just get that sensitive that it can be outside of the body. I think that's going to be huge. Now, the next phase of that is the implantable devices that can then give you the drugs or whatever it is you need for that health issue. All automated, just you don't even think about it.
And the good news is we're going to talk about security later.
Yeah,
you're right. That's a whole nother level of hack, right?
That could be bad. So yes.
And of course, consumer electronics. We know that I think the average person has 1.6 devices. I think is the statistic today, and they're going to 4 or 5 devices. Now that's not my house. I'm guessing it's probably not your house either. We're closer to 4 or 5 or more in my house, but knowing that the number of devices are growing, I always use my parents as my test bed of, devices, but now, my mom has her iPhone, her iPad, they still have a desktop. It's kind of legacy, but that's what they like, right? To still have the desktop that sits over there. And of course, the device that runs the Netflix and those YouTube videos on their screen so they can watch their grandchildren now. And all of these things, just in, my parents' world now. And would I have thought even 5 years ago that they would have been iPhone people? No way. No. But when you can FaceTime with your grandchildren, it changes that experience. And now all of a sudden, they really care. And not only is it FaceTime, but Candy Crush, right? Yeah, I know. But that was part of it. But we're seeing the devices grow from a consumer electronics standpoint. But also, and we're going to talk a little bit about mine inside of here, but everything now, from door locks to alarm systems to the environment in your home, to smoke and water detection, to thermostats, to all of this stuff. That's Internet of Things, right?
Absolutely. And like in my home, the one gadget that I love probably the most is my Amazon Echo. And Google's got one coming out called the Google Home. Same generic idea where it's a microphone that's always listening to what you're doing, and you just say, in my case, you say Alexa, and that wakes it up, and then you give it a command. You ask it a question. It does whatever it is you need it to do. I have that tied to my smart home hub, so if I am sitting on my couch getting ready to watch a movie and I need to turn the lights off, I can say, Alexa, turn off the living room lights. A couple of seconds later, the living room lights go off. If I need to get the latest score from a game or whatnot, if I need to get the weather, probably the biggest question we ask all the time is, what's the forecast for tomorrow? It sounds silly, especially where we've all got a phone on us at all times, but voice command it changed the way I interact with my home. And I think as more devices get that technology built into them, which they are, you're seeing Amazon do that with their tablets now, and Google's going to do it with everything that they sell as well, using the same artificial intelligence behind the scenes. So it changes the way you do things, and it's a good thing. So I really enjoy it.
I think you're absolutely right. We're seeing that voice command starting to take over. And, this year was the first year that computer-initiated search exceeded people-initiated search on the web, which is a weird concept, right? You're like, where is all this search coming from? But you've gave us a perfect example of that where, you actually triggered the device to go out and get the information, but the device is what did the search for you. Right. But if you think about it also is that, when you get up in the morning and you may look at your iPhone, it's got the weather forecast on an intro screen. It's got your calendar on your intro screen. It's got the, it's not a big deal here in Hayes, but the travel How long is it going to take
yeah.
you to get to work? It's out searching the internet proactively on your behalf so that it's ready at your fingertips, not you going, hey, what's the forecast? Well, it knows you want the forecast. There it is.
Predictive.
And we're going to see more of that grow where people are going to stop asking the questions because the computers are going to be proactively giving us the answers before we even get to the question, which I think is pretty amazing. So that was it. And then utilities, I was sitting in a group yesterday of some power utility companies here, and, they're going to the smart meters.
Right.
Which, essentially what that is, instead of having somebody go out and read your meter, it's reporting that data back to home to know what to bill you.
Right.
Which, much more efficient, much more accurate. And that's kind of level one, right? But the next level of that tells you how much power you're using throughout the day or throughout the month and what activities you're doing that's increasing your bill, which then really gives you the power to make decisions on power usage. I'm always reading these things about a power strip that has a little light on it that uses power even though it's shut off.
Vampire.
Exactly, to your point, the vampire power suckers, and giving us the data to make good decisions to save our environment, to save us money, and really that's just going to waste, right?
Right.
So definitely seeing that. Anything else to add on that?
No, again, it just comes down to data and then doing something with the data. So
fantastic. So I did want to tell you a pool story, Justin. Got a pool at the house. I got a little picture of it here for you. But I have a theory. We're going to have the Internet of Pools.
We already do.
Well, we obviously already do, right?
Yes.
But one of the things that when I was looking at this is a picture of my actual pool, is when we put it in, I had to make a decision to teach my wife how to maintain the chemicals, or I could teach the pool to maintain its own chemicals, and I decided that the latter was easier. Don't tell her I said that.
She doesn't watch these.
Good. But really, we had the capability that, it's a saltwater pool, which generates its own chlorine essentially from salt water. But then it's measuring the chemical compounds within that pool water at all times. And so what we came to the next conclusion is through some of those smaller devices, the Raspberry Pis and things, that we could have it dump in pH increaser, pH decreaser, and all those things so that the pool water became maintained when I was on the road. So that was kind of the first step of my, getting it on the internet.
Sure.
But then it got deeper. During the summer when it was really hot here, the pool temperature got too high, which ate chemicals, right? Well, I learned that you can run the pump overnight instead of during the day, and it cools the pool. Fantastic. Well, guess what's connected to the internet now, right? It's got one of those old Wemos that turns it on and off. And so now it knows the weather forecast from my Netamo weather forecaster
station.
And when it knows the temperature of the pool, so it can project and keep the pool. By the way, we like our pool at about 90 degrees. It's maybe a little warm for a lot of people.
That sounds good.
But it's auto-regulating that. And now the last issue that I had was, if the pool water gets below the intake, it could suck air and damage the pump, right? So we hooked it up to the sprinkler system. Just an output on that if the water level gets below a certain point,
squirt some new water in.
Puts more water in there so it keeps the water level at a certain level. And so constant measurement, all these different things going on. The next steps, I'd love it to be able to put the solar cover on and off, but they want $1,000 for that. And for just the stupid motor, I think I can do it better and lower cost. But that's one of the things. And through the Wemo, you can measure how much power the pump's using.
Sure.
And so one of the things I've been reading is that if the power usage of the pump changes, and you have to take in calculation the temperature outdoors and whatnot, because it does change the power consumption, but it will proactively alert me that if it gets outside of these norms, that there's probably something failing. Therefore, I could order the replacement parts to fix it before it actually fails. So that's kind of my current pool on the internet. But really, wouldn't it be cool if my pool could talk to other pools and proactively know what they're using for chemicals and if they're getting a better efficiency rate or not on the chemicals?
Learn from each other.
And then they could go out on Amazon and order the new chemicals, or they could call the pool repair guy and come fix it because it's seeing power issues, and he could 3D print the replacement parts for the pump. Okay, I'm out of ways.
That's a little far-fetched, but yeah, it's possible.
But a lot of this is happening today with some pretty simple code. And, when we talk about Raspberry Pis, we're talking about Internet of Things, right?
Little computer.
Tell us what a Raspberry Pi is.
Just a little computer with all the chips, the processor, the data connectivity and the RAM that you need to run an instance of Linux, essentially. And once you have that, it's a computer. And
like $30 to $50, right? I mean, depending on the
and there's tons. Once Raspberry Pi got popular, now there's tons of other companies that are building teeny tiny little self-contained computers for $10, $15 that anybody can do. Now, this isn't going to run, your desktop applications, but it'll do the things you need it to do for exactly these purposes. Fantastic. And you're seeing hackers do this all the time.
Oh, yeah, totally doing that. So that's the pool on the internet and kind of an Internet of Things, but we see the influence it could have on business, right?
Sure.
Is all of those things within that, the chemicals and the delivery of the chemicals and the proactive fixing is all business models, right?
Right.
And let's face it, I would much rather have my devices call the repairman than me being involved, right?
I agree.
That would be fantastic. And realistically, there's no reason my dishwasher couldn't do that, the refrigerator, the washer and dryer. I mean, those are other devices that are soon to be on the internet. Mine aren't yet. But I think the next revision that we're seeing is going to be on that.
For years, they've been saying smart refrigerators and all that stuff. But you are now starting to see where there are cameras inside watching the inventory of the fridge and photo detection is getting good enough now. They can differentiate between, a gallon of milk and a deal of bologna,
right.
And when it sees that it's getting to a certain level, the beauty is, yes, it could just automatically order it or put it on your to-do list or however you want to do it. Those days are coming.
Absolutely. Which got me to thinking about the Internet of Toasters.
I don't know where you're going with this one.
Well, first of all, I thought printing the weather forecast on the toast could be a benefit.
Yep, I get you.
Which you could do that. I mean, this toaster exists today, and it's a $100 toaster, which seems a bit pricey.
I don't eat that much toast.
I don't either. But I took it a level further, and I'd seen some information related to that really the next level of toaster is to the same point we took the pool, the toaster has the capability of doing, meaning measuring its power usage, measuring whether it's elements that are cooking the toast are going out and those kind of things. And so really, it becomes intelligent enough that it could talk to Amazon or one of these other suppliers and order its own replacement because it knows it's failing, right? We're probably not going to fix the toaster.
Unless it's that $100 toaster.
Unless,
then
maybe even then, I don't know,
yeah.
right? But the next question is does it order its own replacement because the technology is intelligent to know what kind of toaster I've had in the past. It knows what my likes and dislikes are. Quite frankly, it might be better qualified to replace itself than I am.
It could, because depending on what you're Google searching, you might be looking for different appliances, and now you want stainless steel versus white whatever. And so it knows what you're really after versus what you're thinking about maybe at that moment.
Right, absolutely.
So I agree with that.
Yeah, I think we're seeing that change. You know, even the dumbest of devices, I hate to call my toaster dumb, but it really is. I mean, you push the button, it makes toast, right? Mm-hmm. But really, it should be, you know, first of all, put some sensors in it. It knows if I put a Pop-Tart in there, it knows how I like my Pop-Tart. It ought to be able to cook my Pop-Tart without burning it.
Without turning the little dial and getting it wrong.
Absolutely. So I see that stuff coming very quickly as the price of these devices come, which changes the whole life cycle of toasters now, right?
Economy of scale.
Which really makes us maybe buy toasters more frequently. I don't know about you. I buy a toaster when it stops working.
Yeah, and again, I don't eat that much toast, so.
Right, but if they had a super cool toaster for maybe $10 more,
you throw a Wi-Fi chip in it, I might buy it.
Exactly. So that's part of that kind of Internet of Toasters, and then the toasters could all talk to each other and,
Start a club.
Yeah, start a club. There you go. But it's going to drive bandwidth, and I put this chart in there. You know, one of the things, I thought this was a great comparison of, you know, you and I have kind of grown through the cycle of, you know, the smallest little dot there's that 64K, you know, or 56K might be the modem that you started with.
14.4K.
Yeah, I didn't even have a dot small enough for that.
You can't see it, yep.
But we see that gigabit is that big circle out there. But, as everything's talking, we're going to see it drive those bandwidth. Is that kind of what you're seeing?
Absolutely, and not only what typically people are used to from download speeds, but because everything is connected, now upload speed is going to be important as well. You're seeing that with, again, cars being connected. They're transmitting tons of data because they're constantly learning new things. So all of these devices, absolutely, it's all about bandwidth.
And we're going to talk about that data. What are we going to do with that data? And that's one of those things that I think that we're going to see is, Intel's a big player on kind of the Internet of Things. They're producing a lot of these chips and different things. But some of the things that are on this graphic here talk about some of the data being generated. So what are we going to do? First of all, what do you call that?
What do you call the network?
Yeah, the big data, right?
Right.
And what do you see us doing with that big? I mean, we've got all these things generating all the data. So what? Now what are we going to do?
Well, that's where we're kind of in this weird state, I think, right now, where everything's producing data. Certain companies are putting that data together because it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean anything if you can't put it together and make sense of it.
Right.
So there's gigantic databases and intelligence right now being put together to try to make sense of all the data on every platform, on every device, et cetera. So that's really where there's a huge opportunity for certain companies and individuals to get involved in that industry because it's growing exponentially.
It really, really is. And being able to make business decisions with this data is the key part, right?
Yep.
We know there's a bunch of industries out there that have already done that. We just talked about Netflix, right? Mm-hmm. The pause ratio, I have no idea what that does to their network. I'm sure it affects it somehow, right?
Sure.
And so they're reading all of that data to figure out, how can they better serve their customers? How can they better serve, the networks and keep the traffic down, all those kind of things, And I think we see that, which the next piece of that is related to, BI, which is really business intelligence. That's what kind of business intelligence really is. And I kind of put a joke up there that, the guy is talking about his smoke alarms going off. Now he's getting ads for fire, or what am I trying to say? Extinguishers, right?
Right.
Because he probably needs a fire extinguisher now, right?
Yep.
Probably too late, but, it's at least out there. But business intelligence is really bringing all of this data together, and it's kind of the future of this technology, right? I mean, we know all the data is going to be coming in, but having somebody...
You got to make sense of it.
Yeah, and I say something.
Sure.
Making sense of the data so we can make better business decisions. And I put that up there as taking the analytics, mining the data, seeing trends. And we have a lot of industries have already done this, from the grocery store, knowing, if they put certain items on sale, they want to make sure they stock an estimated amount of items so they don't sell all the way out of it, to different times of the year. Obviously, Halloween candy is hot right now. You want to make sure you have enough, but you don't want to order too much that you have to discount it.
Yep.
Lots of inventory type decisions being made. I mean, we see companies doing that all day. That, to me, that's that intro level business intelligence. Mm-hmm. I think we're going to see more.
Yeah, and there's one thing that I ran across that just intrigued me is a company has used webcams to watch traffic in front of their retail location, so that they know how many people are walking by, riding a bicycle by, driving by. They know which side of the street they're on, and then they use that. They build all this data to in turn sell it to the retailers to say, look, I'm going to show you how by you changing your window dressing, how I can drive business to you, and I can give you actual data so when I do X, it has an effect on Y. And it's simple things like that people don't think about. And then when you start tying not only just that raw data of randomness of people, if you start using beacons and things like that in your store, and people are walking by with their cell phone or their watch or
you better define
whatever.
A beacon for everybody.
Well, a wireless beacon. So every time somebody gets within so many feet, you can log that information. You can push information to them. So say you're walking half a block away from a coffee shop, and they know that you are a coffee fan because of everything that you do on the internet. They can push a coupon to you. So okay, I will go over to XYZ coffee shop and have that inexpensive coffee or whatever the promo is. But the beauty is by putting all these data bits together, they can, in the end, sell more.
Yeah,
that's what from a business perspective, that's what it's about. So not using the shotgun approach of just market
Right.
I can go after the people who might actually want my product or who are near my business to buy my product. So, but it all comes back to all that data being put into a database and somebody making sense of it, because you as a business owner don't want to become a data scientist
Right.
to try to run your business. So there's whole industries based around that.
And I think you just said cloud.
Yeah,
I
yes.
mean, right?
I didn't say it, but yes, that's everywhere. Yes.
But because the reality of it is taking all of this data, dumping it into something that a computer can crunch on is an important part of it, and that's pretty difficult to start figuring out what you need on site and those kind of things to make it happen. So you can use the cloud to drive that kind of.
And in today's
analytics.
world, to make a business decision to put that hardware locally these days doesn't make sense. It's so much less expensive to put it in the cloud and let somebody deal with all the security and power and data and scale and all that stuff.
I did pick on one particular industry, the wearable industry. Even in a couple years, we're talking about the wearables being an $18 billion industry. The Apple Watch was kind of at the forefront of that. I mean, obviously the Fitbits were in there too, and some of these other devices, but do you have any insight into what you think you're going to see next in this area, or what do you think what's going to be the next innovation here?
It's hard because obviously I'm an Apple Watch fan.
Right.
The new version just came out and it's not selling all that great.
Right. There's not a lot of improvement over the previous
No,
version.
putting GPS in the watch was the big thing, which is good for runners or bikers, things like that. You don't want to take your phone with you. So I think it's going to have to be a pretty big jump in use case or some new technology to justify it, and kind of going back to the healthcare.
Yep.
To me, that's where it's going to drive wearables is healthcare.
Yeah,
it's not
clearly.
Sports and activity, because anybody who really wants to do that is already doing it with the plethora of devices out there. So it's going to come, I think it'll come from the healthcare industry to say, okay, we can monitor your statistics or whatever it is we need to do for you with a $100, $200, $300 device that you can keep on 24/7, know how your health is. I think that's where the industry's going. I am still a fan of like Google Glass, the glasses with the cameras.
Right.
Kind of died because everybody got so paranoid over privacy issues. But
Right.
I do think there'll be an iteration of something like that again. It has to be less intrusive. It has to be smaller form factor, not so in your face. But I think that is something that's going to be coming again as well.
For sure. And, I have an example, of my parents again, I always use that, and they're Fitbit fans. They share their data across each other and to my sister, and they have these little challenges, who has the most steps, all that thing. But an interesting thing happened on a Sunday night is my mom had that, her heartbeat felt like she was beating out of her chest was her statement, and she got worried about it. And one of the things they called into they actually used a medical app, which we actually use here at Nex-Tech, for some of our stuff. And one of the things they asked was, do you have one of these devices that measures your heart rate? She does. And so it measured the heart rate and found that it was actually within reason. Like
So
it
nothing
felt
to get too serious.
Yeah.
about.
And so it was absolutely among, her standard heart rate. And so it was more of a little dehydrated issue than it was a heart issue, which makes you sleep much better at night, right?
Sure.
And so definitely seeing the medical use for these devices today. And to your point, it will get much better, much higher quality.
Much more accurate.
Much more accurate, yeah.
Yep.
And so then we move on to, this graphic's really talking about all of these devices now working against us. And maybe one of the most recent things was the denial of service attack that happened kind of on the East Coast was ultimately provided by some cameras, right?
The bulk of them is, yes, some inexpensive webcams.
Right. And you don't think about that as being one of those items that would be a security concern other than it's watching you.
Right.
But they are really computers, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what they are.
They've got a processor and connection.
And so deploying these devices at your home, at your business, whatever, you have to pay attention to security. Change those username and passwords. Make sure that they're secured to your network, your Wi-Fi is secured, all those things. I think this is going to be that next revision of security that we see, though, right?
It has to be, because the bulk of this attack was because people did not change their default username and password on their cameras. So if you don't change that default, then that makes it very easy for a hacker to just go and essentially snoop and start throwing that username and password at every device till it hits, and then they know they've got it. So it wasn't a firmware or some kind of bad code issue. I mean, that's going to happen as well. This was the easiest way you could take control of something, and people just didn't do it. So going back to your point, yes, change your username and password on every device when you get it, and make it something cryptic that people cannot guess, because something so simple and trivial essentially shut down major websites, which cost a lot of companies a lot of money.
Yep.
As well as bad PR, frustrated customers, etc. And again, typically it comes down to the simple things. It was a username and password issue that attacked a DNS server or servers, but without DNS, the internet doesn't exist.
Right. Give us a little definition of DNS server, just
in
case somebody didn't know what that was.
DNS, essentially, you'll never remember an IP address when you want to go to Google. You wouldn't have 192.168x.x. You type in google.com. So what DNS does is it translates that name, that word, to a number, to an address. So if you don't have the translation, you can't get to where you're going. It's the simplest service on the internet, but it's also the most important, because if it goes down,
you aren't getting
nothing
there.
works.
Yeah.
And they knew that. They sent over 1 terabyte of data at these servers, which no system can handle that kind of load. So essentially it just overwhelmed the servers, shut them off, and sites went down. It's very simple, and it happens a lot. More than you think.
It really does.
As a network operator, it happens a lot. So it's a big issue. So all these new devices, talking about 50 billion devices coming on the internet, it just exponentially grows that risk. Yep. So security is paramount. And especially when we start talking about healthcare things. If I have an implantable device squirting drugs into my bloodstream, I want to be comfortable that thing is secure. If I have a self-driving car, I want to make sure that
it doesn't drive you off the cliff.
Exactly. Yeah. And Jeep had an issue with that a year or so ago with their tests. So it is a huge deal for sure.
So definitely paying attention to your security, and to the point, that's kind of what we help you here with Nex-Tech. Make sure it is set up in a secure manner, but having an expert, on staff as your business, I think this is going to be the future of understanding how they can take this Internet of Things, apply it to your business model, and help you drive your business decisions from the data and things like that. And I don't know about you, but I hear a lot of times we think we have the data, and when we actually get the data, it's different than our gut feeling.
Oh, absolutely.
So we're moving to a point where it's no longer that gut feeling necessarily. You're making really solid business decisions off of solid data. Did I miss anything that you wanted to cover?
No, I think that's pretty good.
Well, I wanted to lay out, I have one vision thing out there that I have. I have a Roomba, right? It's on the security thing up there, and it talks about if it gets hacked, it's going to spit dirt all over my house, right? But one of those things is, as we see it progress, the version I have just wanders around my house randomly vacuuming. The next version they already released, now it's logically plotting out your house so it vacuums for maximum efficiency. Obviously the next revision, right? Mm-hmm. But I see a day when that Roomba can talk to my iPhone and know where I'm at or what my calendar is, so it's not running while I'm home.
Sure.
And then also that it knows that the dog's in the kitchen and doesn't vacuum the kitchen while the dog's in there because she's annoyed by it. And that it knows that by my calendar, the in-laws are coming over on Saturday, and I better have the house clean so it runs extra on Friday. And right, we're seeing these little incremental changes, and they're all Internet of Things, which increases the value to us, allowing us, the gray matter people, right, to be able to focus more on things that we like to do and love to do, and be able to drive business decisions and really do less of that heavy lifting.
You want the house of the Jetsons?
I do want the house.
Is that Rosie the robot? Is that
Rosie
right?
has to be much smaller though, right? She took up too much space for the Jetsons.
She talked way too much.
And she talked way too much, and so that's our presentation on the Internet of Things. Justin, I want to thank you for joining us today and providing all this value. And of course, any questions that you have, you can catch us here at Nex-Tech, and we can help you with those different items. Thank you.